Broncos country, we are back. We are back. Second part of our draft spectacular. Broncos path to the draft. This week we focus on everything on the defensive side, our strength. I'm excited for that. If you missed it last week, we covered everything offensive side of the ball. We had some tight end picks. We had a couple running back picks, O-line depth, additions in the wide receiver room. Braden even pulled out a surprise QB pick with the 7th round draft selection. Maybe we'll see what happens there. But you can go check that out on our YouTube page or any of the social pages. This week, we are covering the strength of this team, the defense, led by Vance Joseph. So how do we build on one of the best defensive forces in the entire league? Again, we don't have a first, we don't have a third. We need to be surgical. Based on the last 3 drafts, the pattern is clear, especially on the defensive side. Outside of Jahdae Barron, Vance Joseph wants attackers. So we will dive more into that. We've got scouting reports. We've got scheme fits, some trade-up scenarios, maybe some late-round sleeper picks. We've got some news, a lot of juicy stuff, not all related to the Broncos. We'll get into that in a little bit. But as normal, we'll kick it off with trivia, and then we'll spend the bulk of tonight's episode really diving into what each of us think the Broncos are going to be doing in the draft. So let's get into it.
All right. So first off, let me just start out by saying I love this time of year. April's got to be one of the top 5 months of the year, right? At least top 12. But I mean, come on. You've got the Masters. You've got NFL draft around the corner. You've got March Madness winding down. You've got NHL playoffs, NBA playoffs. Like, this is such a great time of the year, and I'm super pumped to be talking about all of it. But I'm going to jump into the trivia question real quick. So I have 3 clues. I tried not to go back too far. I'll just jump in. So clue number 1, I was an 8th round draft pick in the 1993 draft, back when the draft was 8 rounds instead of the 7 that it is today. I didn't join the Broncos, though, until 1995. If I give away the draft pick number, it probably would just make it easier for people to look up online. But I will tell you, it was very low after the 200th pick. Obviously, 8th rounder.
8th round.
Any immediate guesses?
1993 drafted, came to the Broncos in 95. Not off the top of my head. And at this point, we don't even know if it's offense or defense, correct?
Nope, not yet.
All right.
I'm going to take a guess that you're on a Super Bowl team.
Was on a Super Bowl, yes.
Okay. So good longevity.
Are we allowed to ask questions, or are we?
Sure.
Are we waiting?
Yeah, absolutely. You can
right.
ask away.
Were they on defense?
They were on defense. The next clue, I'll give you the next clue. That one gives it away. I'm one of the few Broncos defensive linemen that led the team in sacks in back-to-back seasons, recording 8.5 sacks in both 97 and 98, tying for the team lead during the 2nd Super Bowl run.
Was it Trevor Price?
Was not Trevor Price.
I was going to say, I thought he was a higher pick. Alfred Williams was a higher pick. Ma'a Tanavasa? I don't think.
It is Ma'a Tanavasa. Good pull. Yeah.
Good work.
One of my all-time favorite guys to watch back on that defensive line. I know they rotated in a lot of guys, but honestly, he has something in common with the guy who I called out in our first episode, John Franklin Myers. He was kind of the guy I felt got away. Mm-hmm. They both wore number 98 with the Broncos, so that's where the idea originated for the trivia.
I like that. That was a good one. I it's funny. I actually thought about him randomly like 2 weeks ago because I was thinking of just past winning teams on the Broncos and like random players, and I probably committed the 97, 98, 98, 99 Broncos rosters to memory as a kid, just because like I was obsessive over them, because as a kid you play Madden and you just like learn everybody on the roster of your favorite team, and he was somebody I loved.
Yeah, kind of funny story. Something very similar. So I'm not super proud of this, but one of my sons, he's actually a Seahawks fan. And I did my best to raise Bronco fans, and I didn't get a single one that's a Bronco fan. But he didn't become a Seahawks fan until they beat us in the Super Bowl. And he, 5 minutes after the Super Bowl, just came upstairs and said, "Dad, I'm a Seahawks fan now." And I looked at him, and at that time, I think he was probably like, I don't know, roughly 12, 13 years old, maybe 12, 11, somewhere in that ballpark. And I looked at him, I said, "You can't be a Seahawks fan." Number one, I was still angry because they had thumped us, but I was like, "You can't be a Seahawks fan because you can't name all the players on their team." And what did he do? He went down, turned on Madden, played for about 2 days straight, and came back 2 days later and said, "Dad, now I'm a Seahawks fan because I can name every player on their team."
Yeah.
Fair enough. If that's what I give you, that's what you get.
Yeah.
So was he happy when Russ came to the Broncos?
Oh my God. He was ready to get rid of Russ on Seattle. So he was kind of one of those people that was almost like snickering a little bit when Russ came here. He was like, "Yeah, you guys think you got a quarterback, just wait and see what you got." And
Kid's a future GM.
He also, ultimately he had the last laugh with that.
And they just won.
Yeah,
Look,
I mean,
they lost some key pieces. We'll see how it's hard to go back to back or even reach the Super Bowl. Like the fact that the Chiefs did it 3 years in a row is incredible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why teams don't do it, because it's super. I mean, first off, when you look at just the wear and tear of an NFL game on your body, then you start to add in all those extra games with playoff games. It's really difficult to make those 2 and 3 year runs where you're playing so many more games than everybody else, and your body just can't continue to take all that damage.
Yeah, you need that. You need the players that are willing to take the team friendly deals. A lot. You got to draft incredibly well. You can't get hurt during the season. So,
yeah, having a quarterback on a rookie deal certainly helps.
It helps.
Oh yeah,
helps a lot. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. Like this year, let's say we got this year and next year before we probably have to pay Bo. So we got the window. We got some flexibility. Although, do we get the 5th-year option? Because he was the first round pick. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So maybe one more year added to that. So I don't know. Yep. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into some news. What we don't typically do early on in this episode is talk about each of our big surprises of the week, but we're going to do it. This is Vince's first big surprise that I don't think any of us really saw this coming. I think it was potentially a pipe dream, but Broncos yet un-Broncos news.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that the Penner Group bought 40% of the Rockies. I mean, growing up in Denver, the joke was the Nuggets and the Rockies were just always going to be run in a very inept way. And I would like to think that the Nuggets somehow turning it around made the Rockies look at themselves in the mirror and like, we can't continue to be the laughing stock of the city, because boy, are they well far behind of everybody else right now. But yeah, I mean, 40%, that's a lot. And I mean, it's the Penners. Those are some deep pockets. And so I haven't read a ton about like what the day-to-day operations, who's going to have sort of the oversight of things, but in my opinion, it's a step in the right direction. How could it not be at this point?
Team's gotten off to a pretty good start. Yeah, they just got swept. That's going to happen against a really good team. But this has to fuel them. Great ownership of the Broncos. 3 years in, already in credible improvements, facility-wise, community-wise, obviously the team. Rockies fans should be excited. And I think it obviously positions them to eventually buy the team. I think that's probably the biggest signal here. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the thing. I mean, 40% is a lot, but ultimately I think for them to really make changes that I think the fans want to see, they're going to need to be the majority owners. And I think that's only a matter of time at this point. Look, from the Monfort standpoint, and I'll raise my hand and say I was a season ticket holder for the Rockies, and I stopped being a season ticket holder because of Dick Monfort. I just can't support an owner who refuses to put money into the team outside of, concession stands in the stadium. I want to see a winning product on the field. So when they traded Arenado to the Cardinals and paid $50 million of his salary along with it, horrible. I was like, I'm not going to continue to pay for this. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I was on a text thread with a bunch of buddies when that happened, when it was announced, and I said, kind of jokingly, coming soon to a Broncos stadium near you is the Glizzrilla, I think is what they call it, the 2-foot long 1 pound hot dog. And I just kind of made the joke, the $46 hot dog that you get to wash down with your $16 beer. So be ready, Broncos fans, because that's what's coming to your to the stadium next year.
Just to tie this back to the Broncos for a second, so there's a local sports personality, Darren McKee. He predicted when the Penners bought the Broncos that they would only be in it for like a decade at most and sell it for a profit after having like built a bunch of nice facilities, which they were. Who knows why he thought that? And I mean, it kind of made sense the way he was talking about it, but with them buying 40% of the Rockies, it seems like maybe they're more invested in the area than maybe some previously thought. So just thought I'd mention that as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you take a card out of the Kroenke playbook from an ownership perspective, it's really more real estate than it is anything for him. I think the value of the teams are great. Like, he's been able to increase those, but Penner's clearly taking the same path. And then they've got the familial connection with relatives. Now it's just Walmart who's going to own all of Colorado from a sports perspective, which is wild to think about. But Walmart money is nice. And like we see it Broncos wise with obviously Coach Payton's contract, but there's a salary cap. Baseball, if you want to compete, you just go, you pay the most amount of money. So Penners, they're going to have, I don't really care to do this because I don't care too much to learn about the Rockies and really what's going to happen until the Penners have potentially full ownership. But we'd have to see where they kind of rank amongst owners in terms of wealth. Because I think the Penners are like top 3 in the NFL. But again, we've got the salary cap. Baseball, instead of us becoming the farm team for the Rockies, for the Yankees, like, we just are the Rockies. And we could have a team that actually rivals the Dodgers. Maybe.
I wouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves just yet. The Dodgers, the Dodgers have, I think, every good player. They just every good player that becomes a free agent. I'm not surprised when I see that the Dodgers signed them. So, but I agree, it's a step in the right direction. It's got to get the guy, the team, the guys who are on the field. They have to, get a little jolt from that to say, hey, here we go. Maybe now we can start spending some money and hopefully from a fan's perspective, we can see that reflected in the win column. One of the biggest ways to make a statement as a fan is to not show up. And I think we saw that kind of early in the season. Even though the Rockies were off to a good start, the fans weren't showing up at Coors, which, I mean, some of that can be attributed to weather. It's still early, things like that. But you don't usually see Coors Field having 15,000, person attendance numbers, regardless of the day, regardless of the weather. And when you saw that happen a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, that to me, that kind of spoke volumes. And I think, we'll see just based on attendance numbers, what the fans, our kind of reaction is to the, the new ownership group.
Let's see. We'll have to get our take from our Rockies now, friends. I bet they're over the moon excited. Meanwhile, I'm glad the Penners are going to focus on the Broncos. That's where they should focus. They're going to be good. All right, other news, but not Broncos related fully yet. But in the NFL gossip circles, we had some potential rumors around Coach Vrabel and Diana Rossini. Interesting stuff that's coming out. I don't like how media portrays a lot of this stuff. We don't get the full truth. So anything that I say is purely opinion here. And there's three people that know the truth, most likely. But interesting drama leading up a couple weeks before the draft. What do you guys think about this? I'm glad it's nothing to do with the Broncos. That's my thing. I will take that. No drama.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Anytime anything negative can come to, the Patriots, I'm okay with that. Look, I'm a big fan of Rossini, and I like the work that she does. It's an unfortunate situation. Zach, to your point, I think you're right. There's only a couple of people who actually know what really is going on and what happened. It's a bummer to see her, submit her resignation from the Athletic today. That's just not. I like when there's good reporters out there, and she's been pretty accurate over the years, and I enjoy reading what she writes. So from that standpoint, it's kind of a bummer. She doesn't really touch the Broncos a whole lot, which I'm okay with that. It's mostly East Coast, but look, I never want to talk about things that I don't know the whole 100% of the story. And I think that's kind of where I'll leave it is, who's to say what happened? I mean, there's obviously some pictures that floated around on the internet, but sometimes the story doesn't match the pictures. So we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah. She's great at her job, and it's a bummer from the aspect that, I'm assuming she will be picked up by somebody, but for the time being, we're going to lose out on her coverage. But I don't know. I kind of feel like she's not the only one that was taking part in this, and yet she's being held accountable. And of all the people in the world to be held accountable for all the many things that are happening in this world, for a reporter who was appeared to be in a consensual relationship being held accountable, that feels like maybe not the most important thing in the world to have had her lose her job over, but it not great. And yeah, I'm no fan of the Patriots, so while I hope it minimizes the impact on people personally, I don't mind the Patriots having a cloud over them heading into the draft process.
I love it. Every other fan just sitting there oh, good. Now Vrabel's going to get asked about it leading up to the draft. We'll see what happens. I'll miss her draft coverage. I think it was good. She did some really good stuff with Chase Daniel. I think that was pretty much the last thing she did Broncos-wise was last offseason, kind of track and bow. So we'll see what happens there. All right, last piece of news, but this is our perfect segue into where we're going here. A couple weeks ago, our good old pal Aqib Talib, who's one of the best personalities we've had in the defensive back room in a while here, came out on his show with Skip Bayless and said the Broncos were going to make a splash. 24 hours later, Jaylen Waddle's a Bronco. Now, we fast forward a couple weeks, last couple days here, Aqib Talib comes out again on the show and says, Broncos are going to make another splash. So everyone is starting to talk about this. We'll see what happens. He's been pretty vague about it, but if he's willing to say this, I don't think it's going to be like, Broncos are trading some draft picks to another team for more draft picks. So what do you guys think about this? Any of your kind of wish list items, offensive, defensive, like if we were to make a trade either a couple days before the draft or during the draft, what do you think Aqib is kind of hearing in his circle?
Vince, I'll let you go first.
I was going to let you go first because I like what you brought up.
I have a feeling that Aqib is probably right. Until you actually see something happen, though, it's just smoke and mirrors. It's just pre-draft talk. But I do think that where there's smoke, there's fire. And some of the things that I've been reading, I think this would be a huge get if this is indeed what it is, and if it could turn into something, would be the Lions tight end Sam Laporta. I don't know exactly what it would take to get Laporta on the Broncos. But man, if you talk about a way to solidify that tight end position, I base this 100% off of fantasy football because I play a lot of fantasy football. But Sam Laporta is, he's probably a top 3, top 5 tight end in the league who has even more upside potential. I think he's only like 25, 27 years old. He's young still. He went to Iowa. It's a tight end factory at Iowa. We know what they produce when it comes to tight ends. So, if that is what it is, and we'll see if that's what it turns out to be. But if that is what it is, I would certainly raise my hand for that one.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You look at all the different commentators, and tight end is 1 or 2 as the biggest area of need. And credit to Braden, he has brought up Stowers a lot in this process, and I do think that would be a reasonable target for the Broncos in the second round. But tight ends just, last year felt like a bit of an anomaly around the league. It seemed like tight ends were really productive compared to past years, especially out of rookies, but that doesn't happen very often. And so if you could tell me that we have an NFL season tight end that we would get, I would absolutely be happy about that. And looking it up, he's on the last year of his rookie deal this season, and Evan Ingram's deal is done after this year. And so, maybe I could see the math working out in terms of he would fit neatly into the cap this year. And if Evan Ingram exits either now or at the end of this season, in order to re-sign him, there's cap space there already, and they could just move money within the tight end room, so to speak, to keep him on.
Yeah. I just wondered what you have to give up to get him. So I used my handy dandy chat friend, Mr. Claude from Anthropic, and said, if the Broncos were to go after Laporta, what do you think we'd have to give up? This is funny enough. So Anthropic's in Claude's gotten really good. Sorry, I'm not going to go too deep down into the AI world, but NFL data is great. There's an insane amount of resources. What it can't do well is any of the trade speculation for obvious reasons. You would probably be better off looking at some of the prediction markets. But this is Claude's take. Given Laporta's age, contract situation, and upside, Detroit would probably want a second-round pick as a centerpiece, maybe even a first. And that's what happens early, in the draft if you're going to be doing a trade. So that we don't have. We don't have either first or a second. Detroit might require a rotational piece. So a depth receiver, an offensive lineman, or a late-round pick sweetener. And then overall, they're thinking if we don't throw a player in, it's probably a second and a fourth or a first. We don't really have many of those. So it'll be interesting to see if we do make a splash, what are we actually giving up to get said splash player?
Yeah, and look, I think a first is an awful lot to give up. I'm
For
probably
a tight
not
end?
in. I'm not in
Yeah.
favor of giving up a first round draft pick. But a guy like Laporta, I mean, I would consider a second. Depending, I mean, hopefully it's going to be low second, right? Because the Broncos aren't they have high expectations and goals. So you're hopefully talking in the later third of the second round. So that could be a potential if you're looking at potentially next year's second rounder. Now, again, this is all complete speculation. Who knows? Detroit may not even have Laporte on the blocks. I don't really know, but for a guy that's essentially still coming off of his rookie deal, who has proven he's posted a ton of production already from a position that's been a position of need for the Broncos. I think if it's there, they should definitely explore it. And I think Sean Payton is always looking. He's always looking for that X factor. He's always looking for that, what they call it, the Joker last year with Ingram. So I don't really think that outside of a 1, they're clearly not going to give up a 1. But outside of that, I think pretty much anything else is could potentially be on the board.
Yeah, it's interesting. The only other rumor that I saw was Breece Hall.
I wouldn't be mad at that either.
Yeah.
Breece Hall, I think, is he's a guy who is a product of his environment. He doesn't put up gaudy numbers because he plays for the Jets, and the Jets are always behind, and they don't get to run the ball. I watched him for 4 or 3 years at Iowa State, or maybe 2 years at Iowa State, and the guy is a beast. He can run the ball, so he's. I would not be mad at that.
He's a good receiver out of the backfield as well.
Yep.
Going to be interesting. Well, about a week away, week and a couple more days. Again, next week's episode, we're going to do a mock draft, which will be a ton of fun. So stay tuned for that. But let's get into our defensive predictions here, guys. We've got 7 total picks again. I won't run through all of those. What I will talk about of the visits that we've had confirmed, and this is only on the defensive side. I'm not going to go through all of the names, but for all of our top 30 visits, there's a couple of themes that I'm seeing here. Defensive tackle, a lot of linebackers, and some D linemen. That is pretty much it. So I don't think we're hiding here what the gaps are, what Vance Joseph wants. Like, we need depth. We need to replace a couple of guys that we lost. I'm going to miss JFM. That dude was electric. Dre Greenlaw, it's the experiment that never really came to fruition, so that's a bummer. I'm happy for him he's going back for the 49ers, but what could have been will always be kind of wishing. So defensive line, defensive tackle, edge rusher, inside linebacker. Those are some of the needs. Vince, who's kind of on your list, and let's start with, like, if we were to stick with our first pick at 62, who do you think the Broncos target?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting from a defensive perspective because it does feel like that's our most pressing need. And there are 2 guys that I think, in terms of just trying to keep things feasible, I think it could be there at pick 62. So Anthony Hill Jr. out of Texas right now is seen as somewhere on the border of 2nd and 3rd. I'm personally most excited about him in terms of the defensive prospects overall, especially when it comes to linebacker, excuse me. This is a Mike linebacker. He's big, quick, at about 4.51, should be able to help mitigate the problems that we've faced against the tight end seemingly for forever. Is seen as a good blitzer and has caused a lot of fumbles at UT. Seems like the best athlete of the 3 middle linebackers we've sort of been tied to, which are also Jacob Rodriguez out of Texas Tech and CJ Allen out of Georgia, who are all seen as 2nd round picks, but a little bit higher value than Anthony Hill Jr. but Anthony Hill seems like the best athlete of the three. He's 21. I love players that are a little bit on the younger side and produce enough to be attractive to NFL teams. I feel like you have a chance to grow with them, for them to learn your scheme and be productive players. If he's really and truly a second or third round grade, it feels like we'd be getting a playmaker without having to move up much at all on the board, if we even had to move up. So he's somebody who caught my eye, because I've been wanting a middle linebacker since Al Wilson left the team. I feel like it's been a gap we've had for a really long time. I was excited when we drafted Sanders. Who knows, maybe this is the year that he stays healthy and sort of takes over one of those middle linebacker spots. But Drew Sanders hasn't quite gotten there yet. I do like Stranad, I do like Singleton, but it does feel like there's room for, if not depth, a playmaker there.
Yep.
I like that. He's an athlete, which I think we've been kind of missing that in that position. Yeah. We've had really smart players, but they get beat on coverage. Mm-hmm. And that's like, it has been really the gap since Al Wilson, which is crazy that we're still talking about this. Can we guard tight ends effectively? Right. I think we've schemed better recently, but like, you still need a player that can hang.
Yeah, especially in division where we had Kelsey terrorizing us for as long as we did. You would have thought that we would have prioritized it at some point, but no, here we still are talking about it.
I mean, it doesn't stop at Kelsey. I mean, no. This is the division of, it's been Antonio Gates, then Kelsey, now Brock Bowers. Like, right. Yeah, we need a linebacker that can cover a tight end. Zach, you nailed it. We've schemed better recently, but I'm if there's one guy, I mean, you nailed it, Vince. There's one guy that I would beat the drum for. It's Anthony Hill Jr. I mean, the guy is. These are the notes that I took. Fills the stat sheets. You talked about forced fumbles. 8 forced fumbles. 8 forced fumbles. Like, who forces 8 fumbles? That's a lot. Great size for his position. 4.5 missed tackle rate in 2025. So the guy, when he hits you, he's making the tackle. That's big for a middle linebacker. And he, 4.51, 40, 21 reps on the bench press. Those are all solid numbers for, a 21-year-old guy that can come in and, potentially be handed the keys to, being maybe a green dot, maybe not a green dot, but we'll see on arguably a top 3. I know a lot of Bronco fans may argue that we were the number 1 defense. I think you could probably look at different statistics and make that argument last year. But, arguably a top 3 defense in the NFL. So I love that pick. That is the number 1 guy who I had on my board was Anthony Hill Jr. At that 62nd pick.
Well, Vince, you brought up Jacob Rodriguez. A lot of mocks are slating him. I like almost as many forced fumbles, 7 forced fumbles, but he's smaller. He's smaller than Anthony Hill, and so there's definitely some risk there. He did have some coverage busts, so that might push him down. So I'm aligned with you guys. Like if we've got our pick of a litter there, and we got a couple of different good options, and if Anthony Hill's there, we take him.
Yeah, I'm not a professional talent evaluator, but when I look at the 3 of them, it doesn't make sense to me on how he's rated the lower of the 3. I think all 3 are great. I would happily have any of the 3 on our team through the draft process. However, the fact that Anthony Hill is seen as second and third when Jacob Rodriguez at 24 and slightly undersized is rated higher than him, I don't know. Maybe other teams see it that way too, and Anthony Hill actually becomes available to us around that spot. And I mean, I think the Broncos are going to do a lot of movement. Peyton and Peyton have shown a desire to move up and down the draft boards quite a bit through their time together. And so if he gets within 5 picks and he's someone that they love, I wouldn't be surprised if we moved up just that little bit to ensure that we got whoever they wanted. But Yeah, he excites me. I'd be really happy.
Yeah, and it's hard to, you never know how the draft is going to shake out, right? There's always guys that fall, and there's always guys that are taken way higher than you think they're going to be taken. And each team has their own philosophy on, do you draft based on position need or do you draft based on best player available? I think, just kind of looking at past history of what Peyton and Peyton have done, it's a little bit of a mix of both, but I think they tend to lean a little bit more to best player on the board. I think they did that last year with Barron anyways. I mean, they just saw a guy that they had ranked way too high to let continue to slide. And again, I'm in your shoes, Vince. I'm not a professional talent evaluator, but from my eyes, Anthony Hill Jr. seems to be the guy that if the three of those guys were there, he's the guy that I would lean on.
Yeah, I like it. Let's see what happens. Linebacker, if we stay in the 60s is interesting. I think there's just going to be a lot that we can pick from, which is a good problem to have. I was trying to kind of think like what could be a player we kind of move up for, and I landed on, I think it's Christian. It might be Kristen Miller, a defensive tackle from Georgia. Yeah.
Yep.
Beast of a human being, 6'4", 305. He had an incredible year last year at Georgia. And Georgia is not the team that, they continually are year in and year out. But 11.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 45 pressures. That would be someone that, at least like right now, most mocks have got going in the top 50. So if he slips a little bit, or if the Broncos absolutely love him, I could see potentially a move going that direction. I don't know if he's truly like the prototypical JFM replacement. He's probably a little bit bigger, but great run stopper. It can still get sacks from the interior, which is what JFM was doing. So that's kind of where I went with my pick. But I think he would be a reach. I don't know if he's going to be there at 62.
Yeah, I think he would probably have to be one of those guys that slides a little. But look, when you start talking about guys that play on the D line in the SEC, when you talk about Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas A&M, Texas, when you start talking about those teams, that the talent is there. That's not the question. So, I don't think you can go wrong when you look at a guy like Kristen Miller. I think he's exactly kind of what they would look for. The other thing is, though, I've heard that the Broncos they clearly let John Franklin Myers go because they had confidence in the guys that they have in that room. That's not to say that they don't want to continue to build depth and add some more guys. But I do think that there's some guys in that room that they want to give the first opportunity to. So I don't know if spending, I know it's a second round pick, but that's technically their number one pick. I don't know if they're going to spend their number one pick on a guy on a position where they already have, a pretty solid rotation.
Yeah. At that point, with that logic, linebacker would make more sense if they're going defensive side of the ball.
To your point earlier, though, I mean, the visiting process is also can be used as smoke and mirrors. That's been well documented over the years. But totally. I mean, they've had a lot of defensive linemen in. And so, I mean, I think they will be taking one at some point. It's just obviously whatever they decide to do with that second round pick, they will feel it would seem to be a good indicator that they felt like that was their most pressing need. And I mean, maybe we're wrong about, or maybe Aqib Talib, or sorry, Aqib Talib wouldn't be wrong. We would be wrong on the speculation around Laporta. Maybe we end up going with the tight end in the second round. But I mean, I don't know. I'd personally feel like this should be a defensive pick. Because I don't know. It doesn't feel like there's any overwhelming overwhelmingly exciting options on the offense at this pick, in my opinion.
Totally fair. Yeah, and it like we've got to be, I used the term before, surgical in what we're doing. We have a second, and then we don't have a pick till the fourth round. We got 2 fourth rounders. Maybe we trade both of those to get to the third if there's a guy they absolutely love. Maybe that's where we have one of these linebackers slip a little bit. But you continue to build the strong side of your team with some depth, and it's going to be a recipe for another successful season, especially if they don't have to make an impact immediately. And that's what we shouldn't expect out of a second round player. You hope you can get that. Historically, most productive linebackers have been third round or later for the Broncos, like in that 3rd to 5th kind of sweet spot. So it'll be interesting.
Well, I mean, last year, I didn't see it. I don't know if either of you guys saw, Jahdae Barron as their guy. I thought we were set at corner. I didn't know that we, we're looking for more corners. So to your point about depth and building on kind of the strongest point of your team, the Broncos have shown they're clearly not afraid to do that. So, if they have fallen in love with one of the D-line guys that they've brought in, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility that they would say, okay, yeah, that's our guy. Let's go get him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I read a quote from Peyton. He had some sort of kind of funky phraseology, but he called something like your pet kitten, or essentially there's each year there's one player that they identify as close to we've got to get this person as possible, and they develop different scenarios on how to go about doing that. And so, I mean, clearly you look at Bo, they were not going to sit around to that mid-round pick. They moved up to go get him when all indications were that Bo was probably going to be available later. But if they've shown a desire to, if they have somebody rated highly enough, they will make the move to go get it, even if it's just those few spots or jump up significantly. And so I have a feeling that they do have somebody. I just couldn't tell you who it is.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, there are a couple of guys on that D line. I know Grayson, what's his name? Halton, I think from Oklahoma. He's another guy kind of in that area where I could see him if he's there. He's the guy that moves bodies and could make an impact. Dominique Orange, from Iowa State, he's another guy. So I think there's definitely people that they could be looking at, because look, we're not in those rooms. We don't know what they like. They may really fall in love with the way that somebody processes the game versus what we can see just watching film or watching games played. So who knows what they're actually looking at to try and determine what they're going to fall in love with. But I think you're right. They do kind of go through that and pick those guys that they want to at least make sure that they have a run at. And I'm sure they've probably identified 10 people that are hopefully going to be there in that second round spot, within kind of a 10 pick range. So, like you said, Zach, if we have to move up, we can move up and go get somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you guys think about later on in the draft? Anyone excite you? Kind of diamond in the rough, looking at some of our 6th, 7th round picks.
So I just want to throw this one out there. I know it's not defense, right? But special teams is on, from a fantasy perspective, you get special teams points for your defense, right? So there is a wide receiver out of Iowa. What's his name? Caden Wetchen. I don't know if you guys watched much of Iowa. This dude, he returns kicks. That's what he does. That is his specialty. If we could get him at those somewhere in the, I think we have the last 2 picks of the draft, if I'm not mistaken. And then I think we have pick number 240. So 240, 250, somewhere in that ballpark. But if we use one of those last 3 7th rounders on him, I think that guy could be a difference maker. Last year, I know we have Marvin Mims, but last year, Mims, look, when you're back there returning kicks, concussions are a real concern. And I felt like we lost playmakers who, potentially could have helped somewhere down the line, in other facets of the game, because they got concussions. Mostly speaking of Marvin Mims, because he got concussed returning kicks. And if we can find a guy late in the draft that can be a specialty player who's really good at what he does. I mean, that guy, he led the nation in, I think, both punt and kickoff returns. I know he ran back a number of kicks for touchdowns, but that's the kind of guy who I would think, again, not technically defense, but that's somebody who I would like them to kind of take a stab at.
I like that.
Interesting. I especially if we can get him one of the last picks, that makes a lot of sense. Like, you're not. Well, here's a scheme question. Now that we've got Waddle, he kind of replaces what Mims was doing last year on just the fast go routes. Now you've got Waddle in there that can serve that role, but Mims still adds a lot of value in disguise to the offense. So I don't know if we're going to be willing to put him back there to return him. Mm-hmm. So I like this. I think it's an interesting pick, probably high upside. I assume more on the depth receiver side as well, if he could slot in when needed. Probably plays more of like that Michael Bandy type of role.
Exactly.
If he's smart, if he can catch, reliable, good route runner, but he can make an impact on special teams, like that can change games. So that'd be a real interesting pick.
Nice.
I like it.
What about you, Zach? Did you have anybody?
Kind of later on in the draft, going back to inside linebacker, there's a guy that I was doing some research on. I think he's got the coolest name of any draft potentials, Red Murdoch. He's an inside linebacker. Red is unfortunately not his real name. Real bummer. Real bummer. Red Murdoch, though, from Buffalo. And so it was just doing research like, well, there's been one killer linebacker from Buffalo in the past decade. Khalil Mack.
Yep.
Buffalo, not a primetime college football program, but he graded really high last year, especially in a run defense. And that's like having that stopper. Also, I don't know what his coverage skills are like, but being able to stop the run from an inside linebacker position was really good last year, and 6 forced fumbles. So he's definitely like a 7th round pick that I think could be an interesting play. Kind of the scouting report on him. He's a big attacker downhill against the run, fast, physical, violent. Honestly, probably is more in the camp of like an Alex Singleton, Justin Trinidad in terms of size. So it could be like one of those depth players that show up a year or 2 from now that really make an impact. And then also on special teams can kind of be one of those thumpers. So that's where I was kind of going for depth. So I don't know. There were a lot of good DBs later on in the draft. We don't need those though. So I kind of ignored that and still went back to it's nice to have, but we have a bigger need at linebacker and in D tackle.
I think we could use some help at safety, just some depth at safety.
Yeah, depth. I mean, we were still a little banged up last year throughout the year.
Yeah, and I think PJ Locke went and signed with Dallas, so that's Locke played a lot. So I think there's plays to be picked up in this defense. That's for sure.
I'm of the opinion that our defense, or sorry, excuse me, the secondary could use some reinforcements, particularly at free safety. I wouldn't mind an upgrade there to get a player that would be an immediate starter, would not be within the range of possibility with where we currently have picks. And so someone who I came across, and I can't tell you why I like really big safeties, but there's just something about like the last line of defense having someone who like feels like a skyscraper back there that can swat balls down. But there's a free safety by the name of VJ Payne. He is 6'3" and ran a 4.4. He played at Kansas State, is somewhere between a 4th and 5th round. So we're not talking about a monumental draft capital spend, but someone who I think could, within a year or two of development, potentially make a case that they would be available to take over that free safety position. And you look at our depth there, it's not anybody overwhelming. And I mean, like, you can't have superstars all over the field in a salary cap sport, which obviously football is. And so that's sort of one of the areas where they found sort of good market value at. But to stick with that theme of a 4-5 guy who can cover well, and going back to talking about the need to cover a tight end, if we wanted to use a linebacker in a different way within a specific scheme, maybe we can switch a safety onto a tight end, particularly in a free safety, and a guy who you would typically see at the very back of coverage as a free safety running a 4.4. That sounds nice to me.
Yeah, Cam Chancellor type of build, and with speed, I think that's a home run. I was looking at two different guys, so I think Dalen Everett out of Georgia, he's a defensive back. He plays corner. He probably wouldn't be a 5th or 7th rounder. He'd probably have to go a little bit higher than that, but first team all SEC guy. He was the SEC championship game MVP, had 2 interceptions in that game. But again, a 6'1", 200-pound physical corner who runs a 4.38 40. Look, corners, you guys know it's tricky. Hamstrings happen, right? Hamstrings happen. You could ask the Nuggets about that. But NFL is a physical game, and you can't ever have enough corners, in my opinion. So he's somebody who I would like them to consider, kind of from a depth standpoint. And then Mason Rieger, he's an edge rusher from Wisconsin. I know we have really good edge rushers right now, but again, I feel like that's kind of another position where you can never have too much of a good thing. When you can rotate guys in, and we've been relatively lucky where, knock on wood, Cooper and Benito have both been relatively injury free. Nothing major anyways. But if we can add some depth in those kinds of positions, I think that'd be huge for us.
Eric, I've been on the exact same wavelength as you, because one, there's a corner who I've fallen in love with that I'll talk about in just a second. But in terms of edge rushers, you think of our last Super Bowl, who are edge rushers? We had DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller, but then Shaq Barrett, who went on to lead the league in sacks, who was their backup. And then we had spent a 1st-round pick that offseason in Shane Ray. So, I mean, like, we had 4 legitimate starting caliber pass rushers, and we were just cycling through them. And I mean, especially when you look at the AFC championship game that year and the Super Bowl against Carolina, Brady and Cam Newton, they were not comfortable by any means.
Nope.
So I would love an edge rusher.
You need that, and Patty Mahomes is going to be back.
Mm-hmm.
The Raiders are the Raiders, but they did, I think, ultimately get a smarter quarterback to help mentor future first pick in the draft QB in Mendoza. And then Herbert's elusive. So like, I would not complain about continuing to just have a stable of incredible edge rushers that can get after the quarterback. That covers up a lot of weaknesses. It will continue to cover up inside linebacker if we cannot address that. So we'll take it.
Yep.
But going back to what you were saying, Eric, I agree. I mean, you look at in clutch situations, late game situations on the defensive end, you have a lot of secondary people out there. So you want to have depth and you want to have people you can rely on. There's one corner that I've known about for a while because he played for one of my schools, and his name is Chandler Rivers out of Duke. He's considered a third or fourth round, but the only reason why they have him that late is because he's undersized. He's like 5'9", but he's ultra physical against the run and against screens. 4'4", he plays the receiver's hand. So even if a receiver goes up and gets their hands on a ball, he's going to fight them all the way down to the ground, sort of like Jaquan McMillan in the divisional round, and not give up on a play and try to rip that ball out of there. He reminds me a little bit of Chris Harris. And I mean, I'm not saying he's Chris Harris. I'm not going to say he's an all-pro, but you look at an undersized corner who competes, and, you know, people wrote him off and said he shouldn't be in the league. That's what comes to mind. I mean, we're Broncos fans. We're Broncos focused. He reminds me of a Bronco in Chris Harris. He's somebody I would absolutely love. You talk about third or fourth round. Riley Moss and Jaquan McMillan, they're only under contract through this year. I think it makes sense, especially in a defense like Vance Joseph, to find corners a year early that you feel like you can trust if you're not going to have people back the following year. If I were to pound the table for anybody through this draft process, it was our linebacker out of Texas, and it would be Chandler Rivers out of Duke.
I like it.
I think that'd be solid. I mean, everything we're doing, if we're going to pick a player for the next 2 years, is who's going to be aside Pat Surtain. Mm-hmm. So you got to have depth there. I mean, PS2 was out for a couple games. We had safeties out. So, yeah, I'm all for it. Now I'm going to go look up Chandler River. I love a physical D-back. Like, that's what you need. They're gritty. You got to be willing. It's like that Aqib Talib mentality. Mm-hmm. I want someone pulling someone's chain.
Yeah. Oh, one of my favorite moments in Broncos history. And going back to Eric's point about durability, and Zach, you touched on this too. This guy played 4 years, never redshirted. He's only 22, never missed a game playing for Duke, who won the ACC championship this past year with one of the best defenses of the conference.
Love that.
And I just pulled him up before I even pulled him up, though. You can assume goes to Duke, so he's very smart. Probably, you know, that's the piece I think that gets lost in all of this is we look at everybody's athleticism, but forget that to play a position like corner, it takes way more than just athleticism. You've got to be able to study tape. You've got to be able to know tendencies and pick things up and be coachable. Guys that, you know, typically tend to come out of schools like Duke, they fit that mold. You know, and then the other thing that I see, look, this probably means nothing in the grand scheme of things, but when you see a guy's hometown is Beaumont, Texas, we all know high school football in Texas, it probably is, there's no better state, right? So when you see a guy that, exactly, it is a different level. When you see somebody who's 5'9" coming out of Beaumont, Texas, and going, I mean, I'm sure his height probably played a big reason in why he didn't end up at one of those big schools. But the fact that he still ends up D1, ends up having a solid career, you know, the numbers that you pointed out. I mean, look, his numbers 4.4 in the 40, that's pretty good. 39-inch vert, that's pretty good. So all these things, you know, that those are things that you want to find in a player. You know, so I love that. My eyes have been opened to a new guy. I love it.
All I'm doing the rest of the evening, Chandler research. That's it. Gonna go watch tape. I love it. All right, guys. We're running up on time. Any last minute potential surprises. Doesn't have to be on the defensive side. Week and couple days out. Anything think's gonna happen?
I do think that gosh, what's his name? Mike Washington Jr., the running back out of Arkansas. Keep your eye on him. I know it's not the defensive side of the ball, but that's a guy who I know we're not going to continue to just throw running backs at the wall and see who sticks. We've got JK. We know what he can give us. We've got RJ. We know what he is, but we also know that if JK goes down, and he's proved, throughout history, he's not been the most healthy guy all year, every year. To have depth there, a little bit more, with a little bit more punch, I think that's something to really keep an eye out for with the Broncos.
I'd say, we're going to do our mock draft stuff next week. I would expect the Broncos to not make any trades between now and the draft, but I expect us to be really active within the draft. And of the 7 picks, I'd say we probably only end up using 4, but that we have 5 new Broncos to learn about. And so we trade and pick someone up, and then we use 4 of them in the draft. I do not think this is uber realistic, but there's somebody who I also I went out and tried to find a direct JFM replacement because I do think he was integral to what we did. And there's somebody that I came across based off of their versatility. They're played specifically within a 3-man front in college, and their name is Keldrick Folk. They were seen as a surefire first round coming into this year, but because of lack of production, they are seen now as a late round first, early second. But this is somebody who played in the JFM role of specifically as a defensive end who would also come in and be used as a defensive tackle. Strong, big, fast, sets an edge. Keldrick Folk, I do not think it's likely that we go get him, but if they slide down the board and they want somebody to fill into that specific JFM role, I think he is quite possibly the most direct replacement in this draft for someone like that.
Could be interesting. If it's going to be a fit, you'd probably have to drop, and we didn't have a visit with them, which is Jade Barron to a T. That is what it is. So it'll be interesting. All right, of the players we talked about, only 2 confirmed visits. My guy Kristen Miller, and then Anthony Hill. So we'll see. Smoke and mirrors. It's voodoo doll time for the next 2 weeks. Yeah. I'm gonna go watch Draft Day a couple times because that movie always gets me in the mood. So we'll see what happens. But I'm excited for next week. I hope everyone tunes in. We're doing our mock draft, which will be a ton of fun. And then we are prepping for the actual draft, which will be only 2 days after we do our live stream. So certainly appreciate everybody joining tonight. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, follow on all your channels, and we will see everybody next week. See y'all.
Thanks, guys.